Welcome to the Wise Fiduciary Podcast. I'm Marta Hurst. If you're a plan sponsor, committee member, advisor, or executive responsible for a retirement plan, this show is for you. Season 5 is different. We are talking about the fiduciary red line, the moment where it feels like you're doing the right thing, but you're not. It's where industry standard stops being safe and where a routine decision quietly becomes exposure. So each episode, we're taking one decision point, examining it closely, not from a sales perspective or a marketing perspective, but from a fiduciary one. Because most plan failures don't begin with bad intentions, they begin with comfort. So let's define the red line. Today, we are talking about a red line that shows up quietly, especially in plans that feel well designed. We're going to talk about automatic enrollment features and legacy plan provisions, things that were once progressive and now maybe they are simply assumed. Joining us today is my longtime friend, very good friend, and fellow retirement plan nerd, Melissa Terito. Melissa runs a TPA practice in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Thanks for joining today, Melissa.
Thank you, Marta. Happy to be here.
I have been on Melissa's podcast a couple of times, so I was very happy that she agreed to join me here today to talk about the TPA perspective on this. Melissa, TPAs often see the downstream effects of decisions sponsors stopped revisiting, so that's where today's red line lives. Auto features and legacy plan design components become fiduciary risks the moment they stop evolving. So some things we're going to talk about today: automatic enrollment, auto escalation, matching formulas, eligibility. Many sponsors believe that once they have adopted those provisions, then they are done. But fiduciary risk really starts emerging when features are set and forgotten. So I have a question for you, and I've been thinking about this too. But from your perspective, where do you most often see sponsors relying on design decisions that no longer match participant behavior or even business reality?
I would say one of the biggest ones is the auto enrollment feature. While it's not a bad feature and I understand why it's in there and now it's a requirement, I feel like it's often forgotten about. And, 10 years ago when we didn't have payroll integration, maybe I actually feel like there was probably better processes in place there. I feel like with payroll integration and auto enroll, that actually sets up not a red flag, but there's just a lot more room for error there. Like the plan sponsor thinks that everything's happening behind the scenes and it's very automated. Come to find out, it's not quite as automated as people think that it is.
My initial thought about plan design changes, because when I worked for a TPA firm, we would do a document review process when we brought on a new plan. And I was always fascinated at we're like, hey, you still have comp to comp profit sharing allocation. And they're like, what's that? Or it's like, you allow hardship distributions for terminated employees. Do you want to do that? And they're like, no, why would I do that? So I feel like there's a lot of things that, people make those decisions initially for the plan. And I feel like a lot of those don't get revisited unless there's a change in provider or something big comes up. But
they should be revisited at a minimum every 6 years when there's a restatement period. I am not a big fan of restating the document like it was before. I find that that's an easy way to do it, but it's not the right way to do it, in my opinion.
I love that. And I'll say we work with some other providers that are more consultative with the restatements, but I know there are plenty that are like, well, whatever you had has been working, I guess. So we'll just do it the same.
So I brought up auto enroll because you did kind of put me on the spot, Marta, with that question. I don't feel like it was on my script. So I'm just going to go ahead and call that out here. All right. This is how good me and Marta really are good friends. I think people think when we say we're friends, they're like, oh, okay. Like you're like friends. I'm like, no, she's been to my house and I've been to hers. Like we're friends. Because there's a myriad. Like when I take over a plan, I don't think I've ever taken over a plan and sat down and had that plan design review with my new client and not at least have one thing that they're like, no, like I'm like reading the document and the document says 1 year of eligibility. And they're like, no, it's like, we just let people in when we're like enrolling them for health insurance. Like, that's right. And you're like, no. And it's not, that is not a prior provider's fault. All right.
Right.
This,
Yeah.
to me, one of the, in general, one of the biggest fiduciary risks, and I am not a fiduciary expert like you are, Marta, but one of the biggest fiduciary risks is when you have internal change of personnel, like in the company. And you just think, most people are going to think, oh, well, we just hired Sally. She's an HR director. Clearly, she knows all of the provisions of this document. And Sally just might not be a retirement plan specialist. So I feel like that's actually a pretty big risk in how things can go sideways, in addition to just the demographics changing over time. But it's not a set it and forget it. Unfortunately, your retirement plan is not a crock pot. You cannot set it and just forget about it. Hey, that was pretty funny. That was funny.
That was good. That was good. I like that. I think you're definitely right about changing personnel, and we actually work with a number of our clients on their policies and procedures. And that is how I frame it to them, is like, hey, this isn't just about like how you're doing it right now, but if your HR team expands, if your HR team changes, this is kind of like the 401k 101. Yeah. So rather than, okay, and let me go to my record keeper, let me go read my plan document, let me find out what all the parties are doing, it at least gives like some basics for how things should go.
Yep.
Okay. So we talked about automatic enrollment. Let's talk about that a little bit some more, since I did set you up for that. Do a lot of your clients do escalation?
No, I will be very frank. I was not a fan of auto enroll, and it's not because I don't think it's a good idea. I think it's a great idea, right? I think that it, for lack of better words, strongly encourages somebody to save for retirement without a lot of action on their part. But like I have just seen, and maybe I'm jaded, I've just seen so many auto enrolls messed up.
They go wrong. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And then they're making corrective contributions. So now that we do have to add that as a provision for plans, basically 2023 and beyond, it is having a more in-depth conversation with that plan sponsor, because now they are auto-enrolled and there is an escalation requirement if you do not auto-enroll at that escalated amount.
Okay, two things. One, I used to work with a service provider, not a TPA. And when I would show up to meetings and he'd be at it, he would always pitch automatic enrollment to our clients. And I'm like, what are you doing? Like, you don't know anything about them. You don't know how they operate. And a lot of times when we would have those discussions, because now sitting in the fiduciary seat, we want to do what's in the best interest of the participants. And that was true before, but it was also like, if your HR person is 68 years old and is still doing things like on a paper form or in some internal payroll system, this isn't going to work. You've got to have people who are, with it and ready to progress and evolve. And if Susie's still collecting retirement plan enrollment forms via paper, and that's the only way you're ever going to do it, this kind of thing it's going to end up being a mess. People are going to get missed. It's going to end up being expensive. Although I do appreciate that they've reduced a lot of the penalties associated with that for automatic enrollment plans. You mentioned if a plan automatically enrolls and then they have to do that escalation. Are you seeing more of your plans just start at the 10% so then they don't have to escalate?
No, and I've tried to encourage the plan sponsors for that, but we also have, specifically with this is the required automatic enrollment feature. I just want to be clear, is different than auto enrolls pre-2020, whatever, December 29, 2022, whatever the date was, right? So I just want to be clear on that, right? Because before, you could have an auto enroll and
do it how you want.
4%. Yeah. And the plan sponsors, let's be honest, they had a lot more flexibility before with the auto enroll. Well, now it's got to be where you allow a 90-day permissible withdrawal. Okay. And I mean, 10% that's a lot to come out of somebody's paycheck. I'm not saying it's not the number that people need, right? I think if you can get to 10 to 15% just from all the statistics of how you can save for retirement, that's a good number to get to. But like doing it right off the bat, is that really practical for that employee? And so then let's say they miss it, and then they need to, or they don't even realize it because they don't opt out. And then you have to reverse it. You have to give them the opportunity, and it's not impossible. It's just extra administration.
Okay, that brings up a good point. But I also feel like when you do 10%, then people are more likely to like clue in, and it's like, oh, that was
Fair.
10% versus the 3, where then, 6 months later, they're like, oh, I didn't want that. Well, too bad. It's been 6 months at this point, but I also feel like before, like, the people who are grandfathered and they can do automatic enrollment when and how they want. A lot of times people would just pick 3% and then they would never change it. And
Forever.
We know from a participant behavior perspective that participant's never going to change it. And they're like, oh, look at me, I'm saving for retirement, and saving 3% is never going to get them to their retirement plan goals. So in some ways, I feel like automatic enrollment does a little bit of a disservice to a participant because they just assume that, well, this is all going to work out because my employer is essentially doing it for me, making these decisions for me. So I like the concept. I get why it's a good idea, and it's good for participant behavior, and it helps participants save more. From an administration standpoint, it's challenging. And we have had some plans that just start at 10%. And some of the employers are like, ooh, this is going to be too much for my people, which then they just opt out. So then does it really impact participant behavior? Because now we're just having them opt out because the number's too high. They don't say, oh, I don't want to do 10. I'd rather do 3. They usually just opt out of the whole thing. Hopefully not. Maybe they're like having thoughts about saving for retirement, but.
Here's my take on this participant behavior. I love how we try to predict it, like how people are going to act. It's more like, are we third-party administrators or are we sociologists, right, on participant behavior? I think if they are educated, I think that becomes part of education, right? And there's some things that we may or may not be able to change somebody's mind on, but I've had a lot of success with even construction companies and I'm just using them as an example, that have a large their demographics they have a large range of different types of positions there, and they pass ADP testing, and that doesn't mean that the plans are set up for that each participant set up for retirement, but like their average deferral rate is like 5 or 6% in a construction company. Well, somebody's doing something right. They either have a champion internally about saving for retirement, their service provider is also a champion. And so I think it just depends on what does that plan sponsor want. So I'm going to say, especially with the required auto enroll, this is what's required. This is bare minimum of what you have to do. This would be what I would suggest, but most of the time I'm going to get a little, at least from my discussions that I've had over the past couple of years, pushback on that 10% at auto enroll.
We see that too. And I've got, my feelings are kind of all over the board because we're doing what's in the best interest of the participant. We're also, and the auto enroll numbers don't lie though. I mean, people stay, if you automatically enroll them, they stay in the plan, but then do they also get like this level of comfort that they really shouldn't have because that they're not going to retire rich at 3%? Or
and do they just,
when I was a TPA,
I don't know.
Yeah, I'd have clients that were like, well, how about we just do 1%? I'm like, what is even the point of doing it at that? At 1%? Like, no.
Yeah, no. On the argument, the flip side too is 10% auto enroll is going to increase the corrective contributions if you miss it. So you better make sure you don't miss it. So, it's a good debate to have. It's a great debate. The great debate. The auto enroll great debate.
These are like discussions that should be had with the employer and in the notes about, hey, here's why we came to the decision that we did.
Regardless if there's auto enroll or not, auto enroll should not replace participant education. I'll put it
100%. Ooh, I like that. That's good.
I've come up with some good things. I can't wait to listen to this podcast.
Okay. So we have automatic enrollment features upon implementation, but they can be reintroduced, but they usually aren't. And we have a PEP. We have some PEPs, and that is one way to start introducing the conversations of automatic enrollment. And should you go ahead and do it now? Do you have a lot of plans that have added automatic enrollment? They're not part of the new plans that have added it, once the plan is up and running.
Not a significant amount, no.
And I feel like even if plan sponsors do, then it's like, okay, well, we're going to automatically enroll everybody at 4%. And they did that, 6 years ago, and they've never done another effort to get people back in. What risks do sponsors take by never reconsidering old participant elections? I think this kind of goes back to the automatically enrolling at like 3%. Those participants aren't going to change it. And so then do the plan sponsors have any kind of risk because they're the ones that automatically enrolled this participant at 3%. Participant never changed it. Employer never increased it. I think there's some, and when I go back to the employer who wanted to do 1%, if they did 1% and never changed that, those employees are not going to, not that 3% is either, but they're not going to be ready for retirement. And then are they blaming the employer for not ever? And I think this goes back to your point about education. It doesn't replace education. So those employees still need to know, hey, I was automatically enrolled, but that's not enough to save me for retirement. This was just kind of a jump start.
Okay, so I can approach this a couple of different ways. All right, I just figured it out. It's some days it takes me a second. First of all, legally, and I'm not an attorney, as far as I know, the plan sponsor actually is not responsible for if a participant has saved enough for retirement. So I think a participant would have a hard time filing a lawsuit or making a complaint on that. Does the 1% make sense? And is it prudent? Probably not, but is the plan sponsor truly responsible if they are sending out notifications, if they are compliant with what they're supposed to be doing? They're not technically responsible from my perspective. Somebody could argue that. However, on the flip side, what I could see is if there's a service provider receiving compensation from plan assets and is not providing services like participant education, re-enrollment, could a participant come back and say that person got paid and this is what you told me they were going to do, plan sponsor, and you weren't holding them accountable for that? Did you like that spin? Okay, good. You're looking at me like terrified. But I feel like it's not really setting the plan sponsor's responsibility to say, hey, Johnny, you need to get, by the way, for the audience, me and Marta like to just throw out random names and examples. Okay. We're not talking about actual people. You need to get to 10%. But yeah, if there's a fee being taken from a participant's account and there's something in writing that says part of it is participant education, they don't feel like they've been educated and nobody's communicated that. Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing with the investments that end up happening when the investments go dormant for years and years and years. And then there's lawsuits around that as well. Yeah. I think part of that is because you're paying a fee, right? And not getting any sort of services. Yes. So that to me would be the bigger risk. I don't feel like you agree with me.
No, I'm just thinking about it. And I mean, I think you're right. I don't think it keeps people from
trying.
Yes, or for thinking that their employer, and I've been reading all these articles, and I think when Isaac and I last season talked about something, he's like, there was some study that like participants view their employer as like part of their retirement planning, and I'm like, why? I mean, yeah, their employer is offering a plan, but their employer is not responsible for how much they save and how they invest and how they ultimately end up in retirement. So I thought that was interesting.
I just think it'd be a hard case. I'm not saying that it wouldn't.
Oh yeah, for sure.
It'd be a hard case. That's all.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's talk about eligibility terms and matching formulas. I have a specific question related to this. So there are plans that have immediate entry. Maybe they have up to a year. I made a note about like payroll realities. So what is in the document versus what actually happens on the payroll side, specifically related to like 1 year of service. So I know sometimes I'm on calls with people and they're like, oh, well, that person's not in the plan because they're not full time. And I'm like, well, technically the rules aren't full time. And I'm also seeing now some TPAs are recommending elapsed time rather than an hours of service because of all the long-term part-time. Are y'all doing that? Do you see more of that?
trying. Again, some people don't want to do it. I'm actually doing a presentation on LTPT in a couple of weeks about some of the practicalities, right?
Like how to administratively, because to me, this is not about long-term, part-time. Oh my gosh, I just hate the whole terminology. Anyway, our podcast is not about it, but I do feel like they're in two different segments. And so it's like two different groups of people. And I feel like employers still aren't thinking about those people. And
they're
so
not.
sometimes
I have no problem going on record saying most people, if they have a 1-year service requirement and they're a high turnover, I'm just going to put like a restaurant group or like a smoothie, or some of these where they have high turnover. Granted, they might have a lot of college kids that aren't 21. I can almost guarantee you nobody is policing that internally, and there will be some ramifications, is what I would think, because they don't truly. Part of what we do as providers is to educate the plan sponsors, right? But some of this is, I get the intention behind it, but it is complex. And so, we can tell a plan sponsor, look, why don't you just go to elapsed time, 3 months elapsed time, whatever it might be for their particular situation, so that it would, you're basically, there's no LTPT. But then if they're doing a match, what are the consequences for that? And then the vesting. I mean, there's just a lot that goes into that. And that's where I don't think it's as black and white as just go to elapsed time, right? I just don't. That's
fair. But I do think it at least, I don't know, I think it's worth a discussion about like, how are you tracking these people, and does this make sense? And, all of those kind of things.
In my presentation, I'm going to talk about it, but I don't think it's not a one size fits all, in my opinion. There's recommendations, there's options, right? And everybody likes options. And I think part of what I do as a TPA is, here's option 1, 2, and 3. Here's the pros and cons of 1, 2, and 3. I need you to understand when you choose an option, what this means.
We've been chatting for a while because we are so good at talking. I did have another question for you. What legacy provisions do you feel often survive simply because they've always been there?
Like they survive each restatement period?
Yeah. You got any that come to mind?
Are you referring to ones that survive because they should survive, or they survive because they're just
there?
Honestly, probably the 1-year eligibility, to me, just keeps rolling forward in every restatement for plans that have 1-year eligibility. We're not setting up a lot of plans right now with 1-year eligibility because the landscape.
Really?
Yeah.
What are you seeing?
Most people want people to enter in sooner. Yeah.
That's nice. I like that.
At least in our area. And again, I don't know if this is, I have no idea how it is across the nation. It's very rare at this point that I'm starting up a plan with 1-year eligibility. Very rare. People are using it as a recruitment tool and a retainment tool.
Do you do a lot of dual eligibility?
Yeah, I will do a dual eligibility. I am, as a practitioner, I'm okay with doing dual eligibility on, if we have immediate entry for deferrals and then we want to wait for match and profit sharing. I don't love it when there's a safe harbor provision in place.
It gets extra tricky, right?
It's a little tricky. Still got to run it. Just an extra test we got to run.
That's interesting. I don't do a lot of the design consulting anymore. I've been on a few calls recently, and I'm wondering how many of ours are still 1 year because they really want to be, or if that's just because that's the way it was set up. Good insights, Melissa.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing I see that rolls forward from year to year would be the definition of compensation.
Oh, that's a good one.
To me, compensation, speaking of risk as a fiduciary, that's also risky to me. The more complicated a plan sponsor wants to make the definition of compensation, the higher the likelihood that somebody's going to mess something up.
Yes. Well, we could have a whole podcast episode on the definition of compensation and common mishaps.
Yeah. I mean, it might put people to sleep, but it's a reality.
You say that. And when we were working on policies and procedures, I'm like, there's some stuff I need to include in this. And how do I address this? And then some of these documents I look at have really wonky exclusions. I'm like, what is, I don't know. I found it fascinating.
Well, and I will just say this, and this is why we take a look at our documents every, at least on a minimum every 6 years, right? And there's a lot of plans that, like you guys, we have an annual meeting with them where we're going over these provisions. It just depends on the client, but what worked 10 years ago isn't going to work now, right? And the landscape has just changed, especially as I would say that from my experience, younger individuals, entry level people coming into our firm are almost always asking about the retirement plan benefits, right? I didn't even think about
Cool.
that when I walked in, because I was trying to get a job, as an
Yeah.
ex high school math teacher. So I think it's just the landscape has just changed in terms of the plan design and what's working.
Yeah.
And I always do tell people, I'm very honest because I'm a open book over here. I'm like, look, we can make this document as difficult as you want. But keep in mind, it's going to be difficult to administer. I can go in and I can do all these things. And I sometimes get these documents from other providers. And I'm like, did somebody just want to make this super complicated? It's already complicated,
Yeah.
I've seen some stuff.
Yes, I have seen some stuff too. And I wonder, like, who put this thing together?
Again, that might have been a good default 10 years ago because a lot of practitioners do have default provisions that they put in.
Sure. That's a good point. So I think that the objective of this episode is like there is a fiduciary obligation to adapt. So plans are not static documents. Maybe they need to change because of workforce demographic changes, which we didn't talk a whole lot about, but we talked about participant behaviors, regulation changes. Of course, now there are some rules and we might get some more probably. So I think, it's important that these things be reviewed. Every 6 years when you do your document restatement is not a bad circuit. At least it's, something that's scheduled. Everybody has to do it, whether you feel like it or not.
Yeah. I would say that's the bare minimum. Honestly, that's the bare minimum in my opinion.
Yes, I agree. But at least do that. And then maybe like an in-between assessment as well.
I really think we should just title this episode, "A Retirement Plan is Not a Crockpot." You cannot set it and forget it.
In all of the areas, like, investments, plan design, benchmarking, like, yeah.
I'm just like all so impressed with myself. I came up with that. I think that's pretty funny. Always
maybe
funny.
I feel like that should be a whole season title. And then we could just talk about all the things that you can't sit and forget. All right. So I have been giving homework this season because I don't know. I feel like it.
Do your guests?
Yeah. Well, I mean,
you should have warned me about that.
Oh, no, not to my guests. I'm sorry, to my listeners.
Oh, okay.
You do not have homework.
Okay. I was going to say I wasn't going to do it anyway. Okay, go ahead.
I didn't do the homework you gave me on my last podcast with you. We should probably talk about that.
Oh, okay. Don't worry. I'll hold you accountable. I'll go back and listen. Oh, I did give you homework. You were supposed to do a time study.
I know. I don't have time for that. Okay.
That's
sorry.
the problem.
All right. So I've been giving homework because if people are listening, I hope that it's because they want to be evaluating their plan and figuring out how to make it better, make sure that they're in good shape. So homework for today, consider your plan design. I put in here, do you have Roth? Please say yes, do you have Roth at this point? But I do know of some plans that don't. Do you have automatic enrollment? When did it start? What was the default? Do you have escalation? When was the last time anybody considered your eligibility requirements, as Melissa mentioned? So the most dangerous plan designs aren't necessarily broken. They're just comfortable and they're just what everybody is used to. Or if there's an HR change, it's whatever that person thought carried over from the last job, the way they know it. So comfort is often where the red line hides. If today's episode raised questions about your plan, that's the point. Fiduciary responsibility is not about checking boxes. It's about understanding where the red line actually is. If you want to continue the conversation, please follow us on social media for ongoing insights and commentary. And if you need clarity about your own plan decisions, schedule time with our team at fiduciarywise.com/scheduling. And until next time, stay thoughtful, stay disciplined, and know where your red line is. And thank you so much, Melissa, for joining me.
Thanks for having me.